Keanu Reeves, what can you say about this guy? I hadn't thought about him for quite a long stretch. I mean, I heard one of his movies, 47 Ronin, was a bit of a turd bomb. I never thought the Matrix films were all that special. But in the last year or so, even I had to notice his clout is growing again. The John Wick films are all the rage, and he made a big splash at 2019's E3, appearing in person to promote Cyberpunk 2077. And then the rumblings about a third Billandted film finally coming in 2020. All this made me realize I never actually saw the original Bill and Ted, perhaps the most important film of Reeves' early career, which celebrated its 30th anniversary last year. I remember seeing a few episodes of the cartoon adaptation as a kid, but never the actual film. So before 2019 came to a close, I made a point of finally watching it. And now I'm finally getting my thoughts together on what it was like to behold this classic 30 years after it hit the multiplexes. Last time I talked about the original Child's Play, and how it impressed with its superb practicals and, well, just bringing me back to classic 80s style filmmaking in general. Bill and Ted 1 did much of the same right out of the gate, with its great use of a practical set to depict some bizarre, advanced human civilization in 2688. Not only are the effects really good, it helps build a sense of wonder regarding what the hell is going on. Plus, there's plenty of the old school energy effects I still prefer over contemporary CGI equivalents, but there is some CGI in the film, of course, for the parts where the phone booth shoots through the time stream. Though not as visually stunning as the effects for Jurassic Park's dinosaurs and the T-1000, and though these CGI effects show a bit of age now, it still works just fine over 3 decades later. As for the characters and plot, Keanu Reeves plays Ted, opposite Alex Winter is Bill, two high school slackers so dense you'd think they were the inspiration for Beavis and Butthead. The depths of their dim-wittedness, I can't explain it. Here, it must be heard.
The truth is, Wild Stallions will never be a super band until we have Eddie Van Halen on guitar.
Yes, Bill, but I do not believe we will get Eddie Van Halen until we have a triumphant video.
Ted, it's pointless to have a triumphant video before we even have decent instruments.
Well, how can we have decent instruments if we don't really even know how to play?
That is why we need Eddie Van Halen.
And that is why we need a triumphant video.
The only true wisdom consists in knowing that you know nothing.
That's us, dude.
Also, for most of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, this sort of radical pseudo-surfer talk would be peak cringe. But for some reason, with this duo, it doesn't feel dated. Perhaps it's unsurprising that a film about time travel and exploring living history, then, would not suffer for things that might make it an unintentional period piece. So yeah, that's the plot. The duo is about to flunk history, and thus fail the school year, which would torpedo their plans to start a band called Wild Stallions, and Ted would get shipped off to a military academy. So they are aided by a man named Rufus from 2688, who gives them a time-traveling phone booth to go and observe history in order to ace their history report. And for the longest time, I had no idea he was played by the late George Carlin, a comic genius I respected, with a penchant for uttering uncomfortable truths. Also hitting home for me was how Bill's stepmother drives one of those late 80s, early 90s Mustangs, a car I was stuck with for nearly 2 decades. Ugh. But hey, it fits the Wild Stallions motif, I guess. The movie also refused to take the sort of turns I expected. I guess I watched too much Star Trek or something, because I figured taking so many important people in history, from Joan of Arc to Abraham Lincoln to Socrates, would seriously fuck shit up. But it's not that kind of movie. It's meant to be a goofy romp that's actually more clever than it has any right to be. Also, when Napoleon first showed up, I kinda got miffed about how the film played up his supposed shortness, when that was propaganda and the man himself was actually what was average height back then. But again, this damn thing's rated PG, aimed for the youngins. It's a tad unfair to expect perfect historical accuracy from a film that has Genghis Khan doing acrobatic flips in a mall while decked out in sports gear. Are there any genuine flaws I can point to? Well, I thought the whole subplot with Napoleon was rather stupid, and felt the scenes with him were unfunny and distracting, as opposed to how the bits with Bill and Ted mucking around in time were genuinely amusing, and even had a hint of danger, especially in 14th century England. Watching Napoleon bumble around in 1989 just being a dick felt like a chore when compared to Billy the Kid and Socrates teaming up to raise some hell in medieval times. Also, watching it again a few months later, it was a bit jarring to see all the historical dudes in a mall when the economy's still reeling from the shutdown over COVID-19, then cutting to a report that wouldn't be all that out of place at a George Floyd protest. Also, the bit with Bill's father remarrying someone much younger felt unnecessary, a cheap way to throw in some immature jokes. And from a narrative standpoint, I kinda hated how the whole reasoning for Bill and Ted getting the time-traveling booth in the first place was just a bit of exposition at the very end. But perhaps that last bit was necessary to highlight how there's more to Bill and Ted than first meets the eye. For instance, you have to consider that it's only history these two were in danger of flunking, meaning they were getting by in every other subject. Then come the parts where Bill and Ted figure out a way to repair the phone booth on their own, and the part with the police station showed they can think outside the box when abusing their time travel capabilities. Plus, there's little details, like a message scrawled on the birthday balloon for the little brother, clearly from the duo. So by the end of the movie, perhaps it's not so unbelievable that the duo's music may one day unite humanity. So now I need to see Bogus Journey in preparation for Face the Music later this year, assuming theaters open again to show it. I've finally seen the original, and while no masterpiece, it still has a timeless quality and was a fun diversion. Like the original Child's Play, it was a fun trip back in time to the decade I grew up in to experience a gem that had passed me by.